Nia Caldwell was a woman on the rise, newly promoted, newly independent, and finally standing on her own in a condo she believed she'd earned. But the night her estranged sister showed up at her doorstep with a suitcase and a smile, everything began to unravel. What started as a sibling betrayal quickly spiraled into a deeper, darker truth about power, control, and a legacy built on silence. As Nia uncovers the lies buried within her own bloodline, she must choose not only whether to fight, but how far she's willing to go to reclaim what was hers all along. This is not just a story of revenge. It's about truth, resilience, and what it means to rise from the ashes of a family that never truly saw you. Because sometimes, survival isn't enough. You have to rewrite the story. My name is Nia Caldwell, and the night everything changed started with a glass of Cabernet and silence so rich, I swore I could taste it. I was standing on the balcony of my new condo, watching the city breathe beneath me. The air smelled of jasmine from the candle I'd lit, and I thought, for the first time in a long while, that I was free. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not a soul knew I'd finally moved in, at least, not anyone I cared to see. When I opened the door, my sister Kendra stood there like a headline I hadn't asked for. She had a carry-on suitcase in one hand and a smug look in the other. Her husband Marcus lingered behind her, eyes downcast like a man already ashamed of a decision he couldn't back out of. It didn't register at first. I thought maybe they were dropping something off, maybe saying hello out of guilt or family obligation. "Why do you have luggage?" I asked, my voice flat. Kendra didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. Her tone was clipped, cold, practiced. "Because we live here now," she said, brushing past me like it was just another family dinner. She tossed her coat onto the back of my cream suede chair, the one I saved up for months to buy. Marcus followed, dragging his suitcase, leaving faint scuff marks on the hardwood floor I'd refinish myself. I didn't move. The stem of my wine glass trembled in my hand. I was 36, fresh off a promotion, standing in the first home I'd ever truly owned, and now it felt like it was swallowing me. "This ain't making sense," I said, setting the wine down before it shattered. "You don't live here. This is mine." Kendra turned, cool as glass. "Actually, it's not. Daddy signed the condo over to the family trust. Said it was always supposed to belong to us both." I felt the floor tilt. "He didn't buy this place," I said slowly. "I did." She crossed her arms, tilting her head. "Did you, though? You used funds from the family estate, right? And who controls that? Daddy. And now, the papers are signed. The condo is part of the family trust." Her smile was thin and sharp like a blade. My mind raced. Yes, I tapped into the Caldwell family estate to make the down payment, but only after months of back and forth with the board. It was a structured loan, not a gift. My father had given his word, and a pile of paperwork, to say it was legal and binding. Kendra must have seen the shift in my face, because her grin only widened. "You really thought he favored you? That man raised you out of obligation. This," she said, gesturing around, "was always temporary." Marcus hadn't said a word. He stood near the wall, awkward, like a side character in someone else's bad decision. I stepped back, pressing my spine to the wall. The candles were still burning in the background, and the jazz playlist I'd cued was humming through the speakers, but all of it felt like a cruel joke now. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coup. "You serious right now?" I asked, eyes on both of them. "You think you can just show up and take over my place like this is some soap opera?" "It's not personal," Kendra said. "Really?" I laughed, just once, dry and cracked. "You moved into my home. My furniture, my bed, my everything. And you want me to believe it's not personal." She gave a shrug. "Talk to Daddy if you got a problem. But I'd start packing if I were you. We'll give you a few hours. After that, it'll get messy." Something inside me shifted then. Not shattered, no. Breaking is too dramatic, too loud. What I felt was quieter, like ice cracking slowly beneath your feet. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just nodded and walked down the hall. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of what used to be my reading room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, listening to them walk around like they owned the place. Every footstep was another insult. Every drawer open felt like a robbery in real time. They didn't move in. They invaded, and I knew then, this had been in the works for a long time. By the time the sun came up, my mind was already 10 steps ahead. Kendra thought she had played me, moved in like a monarch reclaiming her stolen throne. Marcus had set up shop in my den, his game console blinking like it had always lived there. I walked into my kitchen the next morning and found her sipping coffee from my favorite mug. Her robe, my robe, hung loose on her frame like it had chosen her instead. "You're still here," she said, voice dripping in condescension. "I am," I said evenly. "And you're trespassing." Kendra laughed, soft and smug. "Don't be dramatic. The paperwork's already in motion. You'll get your copy soon. Daddy's lawyers said it's airtight." I didn't answer. I poured my own coffee slowly, eyes fixed on the swirling steam. Her words weren't meant to explain anything. They were a victory lap, a knife disguised as small talk. She breezed past me, humming as she walked back toward the living room. That was her way, dismissive and deliberate. It wasn't just arrogance. It was power she thought she'd finally claimed. But I'd seen her kind of power before, glossy, unearned, borrowed from men like our father. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even call him. Because I already knew what he'd say. "Let it go, Nia. It's just property." But it wasn't just property. It was my life, my fight, my freedom. And I wasn't about to let them steal that too. I made 3 calls. The first was to Chanel Briggs, an attorney I'd once pulled out of a bad PR scandal when she slipped up at a firm gala. She owed me, and she was the type to chew iron and spit filings. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Review my trust agreement," I said. "Every detail. Especially how they used it to transfer my damn condo." The second was to a locksmith. I told him I needed new locks and a smart system upgrade. Didn't say I was planning to trap thieves in a place they thought was theirs. He came the same day. Reset everything. Kendra didn't notice. She'd gone out shopping. Marcus barely looked up from his game. The third call was to Reggie Moss, a private investigator and contract specialist. I met him years ago through a friend who'd caught her fiancé cheating thanks to his forensic skill set. Reggie wasn't flashy, but he was relentless. The kind of man who could find loopholes where lawyers found dead ends. I sent him the trust paperwork Chanel had pulled. Every clause, every note, every legal breadcrumb. And then I waited. For 3 days, I played along. I let them parade around the condo. I left my boxes half-packed. I fake-called apartment complexes and let Kendra overhear me sigh about bad neighborhoods. She grinned through all of it like the queen of a chessboard she thought I had abandoned. And then the envelope came. Thick, cream-colored, aggressively stapled, legal silence packed into every page. Kendra wasn't home when I opened it. She'd gone back to our father's estate for some family documents. Likely just to brag. I read the documents line by line. It wasn't a transfer of ownership. It was a conditional reallocation of assets under the estate's shared trust, valid only if all beneficiaries approved the move and if no party was in current residence. That clause, that single, overlooked line, said that any unauthorized move-in prior to finalization invalidated the entire structure. Section 5C. Any attempt to occupy the estate-assigned property by a non-primary party without written consent from the listed resident shall result in an automatic reversal of privileges. And I was the listed resident. They hadn't gotten permission. They just moved in. They activated their own eviction clause. Reggie confirmed it that same night. "You got him cold, Nia. This is textbook overreach. You can have them out in 48 hours. But I didn't want them gone. Not yet. I wanted proof. Photos. Text messages. Video. I documented everything. Marcus's shoes at the front door, Kendra's skincare products crowding my bathroom sink, her shopping bags tagged with luxury brands paid for by family money. I even snapped pics of my mail being opened and left on the counter like junk. Chanel filed the injunction in the background. Quiet. Sharp. Clean. And then, on a Thursday morning at 9:02 a.m., the knock came. 2 deputies. Calm. Straight-faced. They didn't make a scene. Kendra was still in silk pajamas when she was served. Marcus came out from the guest room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She screamed, called our father, left a voicemail full of threats and accusations. But it didn't matter. They had 10 minutes to leave. As they stumbled through the living room, packing in silence and rage, I stood by the same wall where I'd once frozen with fear. Kendra turned to me, mascara smudged, voice low. "You'll regret this." I didn't blink. "No," I said. "I'll remember this." The door closed behind them with a soft thud. But peace didn't rush in. Not yet. Instead, something colder settled in the space they'd left behind. Resolve. And it told me this wasn't just about Kendra. It never had been. The condo was mine again. On paper, in fact, and now, finally in spirit. But that night, I didn't turn on music or light a candle. I didn't even eat. I stood in the middle of my living room, breathing in the echo of their absence. The scent of Kendra's perfume still hung in the curtains. Marcus's scuffed sneakers had left faint marks on the floor. Peace didn't feel peaceful. It felt unfinished. I opened the folder Reggie had left on my kitchen counter earlier that day. Inside were trust documents, financial trails, email chains, and a report that stopped me cold. A timeline. A detailed sequence of every decision made by my father and the trust board. It stretched back over 18 months. Long before I'd even started house hunting. In a highlighted section, an email dated nearly a year ago, my father had written this to one of the estate trustees. "Let her think it's hers. The optics matter. It'll be easier to shift title quietly after she's settled in. We'll handle any emotional fallout internally." Emotional fallout. That was how he referred to me. A liability. A problem to manage. I wanted to scream, but something in me had shifted. Again. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted reconstruction. I wanted to gut the thing completely and build something honest in its place. And for that, I needed more. I picked up the phone and called Aunt Viola, my mom's sister. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. Not because we'd fallen out, but because she had vanished the day of the funeral. She'd handed me an envelope and walked away, saying only, "Read it when you're ready." I never had. Until now. The letter was still sealed, still perfectly pressed at the edges. I found it tucked between old journals and an unopened birthday card from the year I turned 23. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant and firm, like my mother's used to be. Inside was just one page. "Nia, if you're reading this, then you know. He's not who he pretends to be. If the house you live in doesn't feel like home, take what was stolen. Reclaim it. Don't run. You were meant to build something stronger than he ever could. If you choose to finish what I couldn't, come find me. V." At the bottom was an address. Montpelier, Vermont. A cabin I hadn't seen since I was 11. The last place I'd felt safe. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I packed a bag, filled the tank, and drove. The trees lining the road reminded me of how silence can be a kind of comfort, or a warning. The cabin looked the same. Nestled between evergreens, hidden from the world. The smoke rising from the chimney told me I was expected. Aunt Viola opened the door without a word. She hadn't aged much. Or maybe she had, but carried it better than most. Her silver-gray locks were tied into a knot at the nape of her neck. Her eyes were exactly like my mother's, quiet, sharp, and unafraid of truth. She poured tea, sat across from me, and I told her everything. When I finished, she said nothing for a full minute. Then, "You're not the first woman in our family to be made small." She led me to a chest hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside was everything she had kept. Letters my mother wrote in secret, hospital records, trust fund statements, property deeds. But the thing that struck hardest was a notarized version of my mother's will, rewritten just weeks before she passed, replaced later by the one my father had filed instead. In my mother's version, everything was meant to come to me. The condo, the trust, the foundation. But it had been replaced, doctored, her signature forged, her intentions buried beneath legal jargon and paid-off trustees. There were also medical documents. Pages of questions my mother had written to a doctor I'd never met. Questions about dosage, side effects, memory loss. Viola handed me a folder sealed with my father's initials and the date of my mother's passing. "I haven't opened it," she said, "but I think you should." I didn't open it that night, but I knew what it contained. Proof. Proof that what my father did wasn't just betrayal. It was closer to murder. The slow kind. The kind they never charge. The kind hidden behind silence and status and careful language. And now I had everything. I returned to the city with a plan and a fire in my chest that refused to dim. My first stop wasn't my condo. It was a quiet corner cafe on 7th and Hollis, just 3 blocks from downtown's financial district. Tucked behind the chaos, it was where I met Dorian Keene, a journalist whose work had forced 3 city officials into early retirement and put 1 billionaire in federal custody. He didn't ask for pleasantries, just facts. I gave him the folder, notarized documents, financial statements, medical records, copies of the revised will, and the forged signature side by side with my mother's real one. As he flipped through it, his hands didn't shake, but I noticed how often he paused. Not for clarification, but for breath. By the time he closed the folder, the look on his face said everything. "You're not just taking your family down," he said. "You're dismantling a legacy." "No," I replied, calm. "I'm reclaiming one." We agreed on timing. His team would verify documents, source corroboration, and begin the narrative rollout only when the story was airtight. I knew the risks: defamation suits, smear attempts, retaliation. But I also knew what I had. Facts. Undeniable. Untampered. Undone only by the truth. That evening, I finally opened the folder Viola had handed me. Inside were records from my mother's final weeks, handwritten notes from nurses, pharmacy discrepancies, and financial transfers that occurred while she was in palliative care. She hadn't just been isolated. She'd been systematically removed from her accounts, her name, her home, her legacy, by the man she married. I called Geneva, my attorney, and walked her through everything. Her voice was clipped firm. What he did, Nia, wasn't just manipulation. It's criminal. We prepared the legal motion, an injunction to challenge not just the trust, but the integrity of the entire estate. This wasn't about my condo anymore. It was about the foundation of everything my father built, the empire that stood on my mother's grave. We filed a lawsuit in 3 jurisdictions. We also filed criminal referrals. And then we waited. The ripple began as whispers in boardrooms. Then emails slowed. Then bank accounts locked. Then advisors quit. My father's legal team tried to stay ahead of the damage, but they didn't have the leverage they were used to. My team had receipts, timeline gaps, signed documents, statements from caregivers, even one recording of a meeting where Samantha discussed the inevitability of the condo becoming theirs anyway. I played it twice, not out of anger, but to memorize the sound of my sister's betrayal. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. The Estate of Shadows: How One Woman Unraveled the Lie Her Family Called Legacy. It was published across 6 platforms. There were timelines, testimonies, side-by-side scans of altered documents, annotated emails, tax filings, video snippets from depositions, audio clips of my father's private estate meetings, leaked anonymously. My mother's name appeared again and again, not as a footnote, but as a foundation. The woman who had quietly built the wealth that had funded everything, only to have it repackaged under someone else's banner. The public responded with fire. By day 2, for trustee resignations. By day 4, a formal investigation by the State Commission on Charitable Affairs. By day 7, my father's passport was revoked pending inquiry. And that Sunday, Kendra appeared at my doorstep. No suitcase this time. Just a look I hadn't seen since we were girls. One filled with confusion and a hint of shame. Marcus was with her, silent as always. "You could have ruined us," she said quietly. I opened the door wider. "No, you did that on your own. I thought it would protect us," Dad said. I raised a hand. "He lied, and you helped him." She didn't deny it, just nodded, her mouth trembling. "You'll never forgive me," she whispered. "No," I said, "but I won't chase revenge either." She walked away without another word. And for once, I didn't feel satisfaction or anger, just release. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of white wine in silence. Inside, Geneva read through the court's newest ruling. Dorian emailed the next piece, an expose on the family foundation's hidden offshore pipeline. Aunt Viola rested in the guest room. Her presence felt like a tether, one that pulled me back from rage and reminded me why this mattered. The condo felt whole again, not just structurally, but emotionally. It had been colonized, invaded, fought for, and now it was cleansed. 3 days after the second article dropped, a federal grand jury requested full financial records of the Carter family trust. Headlines flared. From philanthropy to fraud, Carter legacy under scrutiny. Daughter of disgraced business icon exposes deep systemic corruption. The final blow came quietly. An anonymous whistleblower, an ex-accountant, leaked internal memos from 2 decades back. In them, my father's strategy was outlined with surgical precision. Consolidate control of Viola's assets. Reassign property deeds quietly. Restructure the trust to phase me out over time. And bury the truth beneath layers of corporate fog. He hadn't just outmaneuvered my mother. He'd erased her. That night, I stood in the hallway of the foundation we were rebuilding, the Marielle Carter Center, named, finally, for the woman who had paid for it all in silence. The gallery's grand opening was simple. Quiet lights, clean walls, no speeches, just photos of my mother, untouched by time and undiminished by lies. Letters she wrote, paintings she never sold, her last poem, displayed beneath glass. I am not your silence. I am your storm. The walls you built on my back will crumble by my name alone. The press called it poetic. I called it justice. A week later, Geneva sent word that the court had approved the full restructuring of the trust. The assets my mother built were returned to the line of women they were always meant for. Her will was restored, her estate reclaimed. Elaine and I were named primary beneficiaries and permanent custodians of the Marielle Carter Center. All other claims were denied. My father had lost everything. The properties, the title, the name. Even his most loyal allies fell silent. The family home was sold at auction. Samantha's accounts were frozen pending review. The board that once carried my father's name stripped it from every building. But none of that brought me peace like the moment I opened my mother's journal again, now held in a display case in the center of the foundation. On the inside cover, in faded ink, she had written, "If she finds this, tell her she wasn't wrong to fight. Tell her she was always worth the war." I read it twice, then closed the glass gently. Months passed. I returned to the condo and repainted the walls. The ghosts were quieter now, the shadows familiar. The silence didn't ache, it settled. Geneva visited often. So did Dorian, who was working on a book. Michael took up an office in the foundation. Viola stayed a few weeks longer than planned, just enough to feel like family again. We didn't talk about forgiveness much. We talked about rebuilding. Samantha sent one last email, no subject line. Just one sentence. I see it now. I didn't reply, but I did feel the release in my chest. Later that year, I was asked to speak at a women's leadership summit. Not about business or betrayal, but about legacy. I stood behind a podium in a white suit, sunlight pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was filled with young women, daughters, nieces, granddaughters of women whose names were never written in bold. I didn't give them strategy. I gave them truth. Legacy isn't what you inherit, I told them. It's what you fight to protect. It's not built on names or net worth. It's built on choice, on what you refuse to let be erased. Afterward, a girl no older than 16 came up to me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not invisible." And just like that, it was worth it. All of it. The war. The loss. The burning down. Because what grew after was real. Not perfect. Not clean. But earned. And maybe that's the best kind of ending. Not revenge. Not even redemption. Just freedom. To be the author of your own story. To refuse to disappear. To love harder, louder, without apology. To live without fear that someone else will steal your light. I stood on my balcony again that night, looking out at the city. A new bottle of wine. A new page. No ghosts. No regret. Just me. And the woman who made me, finally free. Are you ready to unearth the truth? Follow Nia Caldwell's journey as she reclaims her voice, exposes buried betrayal, and rebuilds a legacy meant to silence her. Sparkles watch. Share. Speak up. Because some stories aren't just meant to be told. They're meant to set others free.